Welcome to Color Mixing Essentials Part 3. In this section, we're going to cover complementary colors and how mixing them can really create some interesting color combinations. So in your PDF, you should have printed out the complementary color printout, and I'm going to go over a couple of things on this sheet. So just to define what complementary colors are, let's go back to the color wheel. Complementary colors are the color that is opposite on the color wheel. So for example, primary blue, its complement is orange because it's directly across from each other on the color wheel, opposite each other. The complementary color of red is green. The complementary color of yellow is violet. So that gives you a sense of how you can figure out the complementary colors. So it works also on the tertiary colors. For example, the red-violet, the complementary or opposite color would be yellow-green. So that is what complementary colors are. Now, I gave you on your sheet, what it looks like. Now, one of the things that's really interesting about complementary colors is that when you put them together, like for example, red on the green, it creates almost visually an illusion of vibration, like it's vibrating against each other. Same thing with orange and blue. It tends to vibrate and create this energy. So a lot of times that's best to, like when you're creating a big sign, you don't want to put red text on a green background because it's very difficult to read. So what is also important about this is that when you're painting your artwork or whatever color combination that you're creating in your artwork, that can create some tension. It can also create a very dynamic feel and dramatic feel on your artwork. Here is an example of a scale, and that's what we're going to actually be working on in this section. Is you're going to be creating a scale with the complementary colors. I also have a little chart that shows you the complementary colors of each color on the wheel, as well as listing them here for you. So getting back to the scale, we're going to be, this is when things get really interesting with color, because you can shift the characteristic of a color very subtly by adding a complementary color to it. Its complementary color. So for example, this is primary blue, and its complementary color is orange. That is opposite on the color wheel. As you begin to add that orange, it starts to shift in many ways. So for example, you adding orange to blue, we get this really interesting teal happening. We get almost a hunter green, and then it becomes almost a dark olive green. With the orange, it starts to get into rust, and that's very interesting. You're not adding any black to this. It's complementary. Another example is this yellow. When you add purple to yellow, it starts to actually make it more olive. So it really, remember when we talked about saturation, adding its complementary starts to desaturate the color. It almost subtracts the hue from its original color. So keep that in mind. Another term is you mute the color as well. What we're also going to do is we're going to do your puzzle pieces. And this is again going to be an exercise to see what happens as you start adding less and more complementary color to your base color. So this is what happens in your puzzle pieces. It really gives you an idea of that subtle shift. And what's really interesting here is that you really can see that you get such variation in the color when you work with blue and orange. So what you're going to need for this section, again, you want to make sure that you have enough of these strips for your scales. You're also going to need 2 puzzle pieces to work on. Okay, so let's get started. Okay, let's get started on our scale, our color scale for complementary colors. So for this exercise, I'm going to go ahead and do blue and orange. And keep in mind that whatever color you select on the color wheel, you will have to, one of those colors is going to be a secondary color. And remember, secondary color is 2 primary colors mixed together. So you have to mix that secondary color ahead of time. So for example, if you select yellow, even though that's a primary color, the complementary color would be violet. So you're going to have to pre-mix the violet, because that's the secondary color. So keep that in mind. So for this exercise, I'm going to do blue, and its complementary is orange. So that means I will have to mix the orange before I start introducing the orange into the blue. So I'm going to make sure that I have enough orange pre-mixed. And you want to use a medium-sized brush for this. That seems to give you enough coverage when you paint your swatch of color onto your scale. Okay, that seems to be the right orange. Now I'm going to, because I have so much of this on the bristle, I can choose to start the first swatch of color at orange. Again, there's a little bit of translucency there, so I'm going to get my hair dryer and just dry that so I can do another coat. Okay, so what I'm going to do is now get another brush. Since I have quite a bit of that orange, I'm going to get another brush so that I can control the amount of blue that starts to go into that orange. So remember which color is your dominant color, and you can see how that blue really took over that orange very quickly. There you go. So I'm slowly introducing more and more blue into that. But doing it very slowly, because you can see the complementary color is really going to desaturate that color very quickly. Now I'm leaning more towards the blue, so this one's going to be more of a teal blue. Now another thing too, if it turns out that you have found that you actually have another step, you know, it's okay. You don't have to stay with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 scales or stages. You can actually add to that, because there's so many subtleties in each level. You may come across one that's in between. And that's too similar to that. I'll mix some more blue. And I'm finding that this actually is really going to provide me more levels. Yeah, this one really is very teal. Okay, so the next swatch is going to be 100% blue, so I'm going to get a new brush for that. There you go. So now that you can let that dry. I want to put that here. Now that you have those colors on your palette, you can start your puzzle pieces. So I already have blue on this, so I'm going to go ahead and make one of these squares 100% blue. And actually switch to a smaller brush. And then you're going to do similar to your tints and shades. You're going to just start filling each square with a different shade or color that is created from mixing those complementary colors. Now it looks like I've run out of orange, so I'm going to go ahead and create more orange on my palette. And I have a brand new clean brush so that I can get a sense of the pure orange that I'm trying to create. If I was to use the brushes that already have blue, I would not be able to see that true orange. So if you have to mix more secondary color, make sure you use a clean brush. I really like this combination of complementary colors because it just gives me such a variety of different colors from this palette. And don't be afraid to have actually 3 or 4 brushes going at the same time here. There you go. So what you can do is you can walk through this exercise again, maybe selecting a different color combination, and practice doing that. I would suggest doing 2 combinations of complementary colors. Like this one I did, the orange and the blue, and then on this one I did the purple and the yellow. So I would suggest to actually do 2 of them so that you really get a sense of how complementary colors work. So I wanted to quickly show you how to mix the color brown and also the term mud. So as you notice, going back to the color wheel, you'll notice there's no brown on the color wheel. So what we're going to do is I'm going to show you how to make brown. The easiest way is to mix orange and blue, and that will give you a brown. Now you can have different shades of brown. Your brown can be, a little bit on the warm yellow side, or it can also be on the cool side or the darker side, sort of like a dark chocolate brown. So that gives you kind of a yellow brown. And if I was to mix red in there, a little bit more red, we're going to get a different shade of brown. Kind of a rust color. So the reason why I'm showing you this is because brown is sort of a result of crossing over those complementary colors and having that affect the color that you're trying to mix. So if I wanted a little bit of a darker brown, I would put more red and blue. So as you see, as I'm mixing, I'm actually mixing in some different different degrees of the complementary colors. So, for example, I started out with blue and orange, and that is a complementary. And then I added more red to get a more rust, and I added more blue to get more of a dark chocolate brown. So, what is the terminology mud? If you hear a lot of people saying, I started mixing colors and then all of a sudden I reached mud. Well, what happens when you reach mud? You might start out mixing a bunch of colors. You're trying to duplicate a color that you saw in an image or a design, and you want to duplicate that color. And all of a sudden, as you're mixing, you cross-contaminate your complementary colors, and then you just realized, okay, well, now this looks almost gray. So mud really is the result of mixing way too many colors, cross-contaminating them with complementary, and then you get this sort of gray mud color. And this is what that color looks like. And you can get different degrees of this color. That is considered mud when it feels like there's no real distinct color to it. It just looks very gray. It looks very muted. It almost feels like the absence of color or hue. And if you started mixing some black and white in there, you will definitely get that sort of grayish color. So I'm just showing you what happens when you mix way too many colors and you get to that place. Now, even for the most experienced artists, including myself, I will still end up with mud. And it's because what happens is that I'm trying to get, maybe sometimes, for example, I'm trying to mute a purple and I add yellow to it. And if I add way too much yellow and then I add white, then I get to that place. So I just wanted to let you know, even people with a lot of experience end up with mud. And that's okay, because you do have to get to that place a few times during the process of practicing. This is another lighter shade of mud I wanted to show you. So the reason why I wanted to show you first how to mix brown and then showing you mud, it really is a very similar process to get there. So I just wanted to go over that term so you would know if you end up in this area of colors where it's just very muted and very gray, you can say, I think I've just gotten to the color of mud. Okay? So just be very careful when you're mixing color, that you have to be aware of as soon as you hit a complementary color into your color mixing, it'll go to that mud or that gray or muted color very quickly. So you have to be very careful on the amount of complementary color that you introduce into your mixture.